I've actually worked at the Disney studio on a number of occasions. So the first time that I was there, I worked on Mickey's Christmas Carol, and I was an in-betweener working under Randy Cartwright, who was one of the top animators there at the time, and learned a lot. I really had a great time. But Randy quit the studio when Mickey's Christmas Carol was done. He went to Japan to work on the Little Nemo feature, and which kind of left me without an animator to work on. And then I was put on the Black Cauldron, which I did not want to work on particularly. And I did for a year and really just did not like it. And I wanted to be an animator, and I did some animation tests, but that which you need to do in order to qualify to be an animator. But I wasn't promoted to an animator, and I was really not happy, and I left the studio in 1984. And ironically, 3 months later, there was a whole upheaval when Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg moved in, and Frank Wells, and took over running Disney. And they kicked all the animators out of the beautiful animation building and put them in a warehouse, and the whole feature animation side of Disney looked like it could be just fall by the wayside. What I did is I just looked for other jobs and learned new skills. I worked in TV for a while learning storyboarding, and I worked on some small features, and I've come back to Disney on several other occasions. The first time I animated at Disney was on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and which I was really fortunate to work on. This was in Los Angeles, while the majority of the film was done in London. But I think I worked on it for about 7 months, and again, learned a lot. It was a great challenge, but it was a wonderful film to be able to get to work on. And when that was done, I left Disney again, and I just jumped around a lot of different studios, and I really enjoyed the freedom of doing that. And since then, I've bounced back and forth between doing storyboards and animating, or both on a film. So I worked on over the years. And I came back at Disney again. I worked on first of all, Back to Neverland. And I have animation from that. I'm going to show this real quick. Back to Neverland is a short film that was designed for the MGM Disney studio tour that they had at Disney World in Florida. And so there's a little film with Walter Cronkite and Robin Williams explaining the process of animation. So here is one of the scenes that I did, and this scene is final as is. It's a pencil test scene. So he jumps up, turns himself into a little baby with a milk bottle. Then he turns himself into Peter Lorre or something like that. Then a lumberjack. He wiggles his toes, and at the end, he becomes Walter Cronkite. So, and I actually got to write some of the dialogue, and I got to be at the recording session for that. And so it was a 14-minute film that explained the process of animation, and from story ideas to storyboards to rough animation to cleanup, backgrounds to ink and paint, all the way through the whole process. And it was a wonderful project. I think really minute for minute, I think that's the best project I've ever worked on. Just from beginning to end, each phase added to the preceding phase and made the film better. And it was a wonderful project. And I felt so fortunate to be on that. And then from that, I jumped onto Roger Rabbit shorts, the first of 3 that they did, called Tummy Trouble, which was really fun. And then after that, I worked on another short film. So Jerry Reese was the director of Back to Neverland, and when that was done, he jumped onto another project for the studio tour in Florida called Michael and Mickey. which is Michael Eisner and Mickey Mouse. And so when Tummy Trouble was finished, I jumped onto Michael and Mickey, and I actually got to animate Chernabog, the devil in Nine on Bald Mountain from Fantasia, which was really cool. So great short projects, and I really like working on short projects too, occasionally, as opposed to features, because you can experiment so much on a shorter film. Then I left Disney again. I think I worked on Rover Dangerfield, and I was in on that from the very start. There were only a handful of us working on that, doing storyboards, and Rodney Dangerfield, of course, it was his idea, and he was executive producer, which was made for quite interesting times. He's not a dull character to be around. The film, of course, didn't quite live up to our hopes. We had a decent budget, but not enough good people to really, from every phase, make it work. But there's a lot of good stuff in it that I'm really proud of. And I both storyboarded and animated on that, and it's really fun to be able to animate things that I've storyboarded myself. And so over the years, I've worked at other studios, DreamWorks. I worked on The Road to El Dorado. Same thing there, where I storyboarded for a year and a half and then animated for a year and a half. Curious George, I did both storyboards and animation. A whole lot of other projects. And then I came back to Disney when they were rebooting traditional animation, and I worked on The Princess and the Frog. And after that, the Winnie the Pooh movie, and after that, I worked on Paperman, the Academy Award-winning short, and that really opened my eyes to what can be done digitally. And I did a number of tests after Paperman was done, animating traditionally but digitally, drawing directly on the computer screen, and it really made me see what can be done with technology and still drawing. Okay, my segue into digital art started years ago because I also do children's books, and so I learned Photoshop, and I have to say, I am by nature, probably like most traditional animators, I am no techie. Technology does not come easy to me. And what was really fortunate is, we can show some of my books later on, but I learned Photoshop in order to do illustration for my books. And what I did, I remember during Curious George, early on when the production was slowly ramping up, I spoke to a lot of the background painters who gave me a lot of pointers, and they said, the best way to learn is just do it. And as you run into problems, just talk to us. And so that's what I did. I just started little projects just as a test for myself. And I actually wrote down, what do I do for this? What do I do for that? And the next morning I would bring it in and talk to these guys. And I gradually learned. And after a while, thankfully, again, I'm no genius with technology, but Photoshop, when you get to a point, I think you feel comfortable enough to start solving your own problems. And of course, nowadays there's YouTube. You can find any answer to any question you have. But so I learned to paint on Photoshop and draw, and I also use Sketchbook Pro, which I love drawing with. So I use those two all the time. But at the tail end of working on Paperman and working digitally, that made me see that you could animate as well digitally, and you can use textures and different brush lines so much easier than you can on paper. And I think, to me, it opened up a whole new world. And unfortunately, Disney, basically, it seemed like this wonderful door was open to this new world with Paperman, and as soon as Paperman was done, they shut it again. And they stopped doing traditional animation altogether. They never did another short in that style. They never explored it anymore. And I think it's so unfortunate, because to me it kind of brought traditional animation into the 21st century, and there is so much you can do. And I think cost-wise, it makes traditional animation a lot more less expensive to do. You can control things so much easier.